This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on significance of India-Japan strategic partnership addressing global challenges and stability. The participants are Professor Swaran Singh, strategic analyst, and Manash Pratim Bhuiyan, journalist.
Professor Singh, there has been significant expansion in India-Japan bilateral strategic cooperation, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, against the backdrop of China's increasing military assertiveness. How do you see these fast expanding contours of India-Japan strategic engagement in the Indo-Pacific and in the region?
Manas, as you mentioned, much of media debate on India-Japan relationship does underline the China factor, which of course is their shared challenge. But there is a lot much more that defines India's relations with Japan or Japan's relations with India. For example, since ancient times, Buddhism, for example, is a very strong link. More contemporary times have seen both being proponents of democracy, pluralism, open societies, and more recently also of the Asian genre of multilateralism, in which you did mention the Indo-Pacific, which brings them really close. Of course, enormous complementarities between two sides. Japan is an advanced technology country. India is enormous market for investments. So that also they makes them each other's great partners. And that is what you saw the foreign minister who's in Tokyo today for 16th foreign minister strategic dialogue with Japanese foreign minister Ms. Yoko Kamikawa. He did underline the fact that I think we need to now take the next step and understand that the transformation that India is going through and how India becomes for Japan even more attractive as a credible partner in whether it is doing business in terms of ease of business or digital delivery, startups, innovation, and so on. So I think it's an enduring relationship. It's a multi-sectoral relationship. It's a relationship since ancient times. And a whole lot of things that bring them closer together, including personalities in terms of the chemistry that leaders on both sides have shared. So it's a holistic picture that describes and defines India-Japan relationship, in which I do agree China remains an important factor that brings them closer together.
Yeah, I would also like your specific views about the trajectory of India-Japan ties in the economic sphere. What are the major achievements of bilateral relations in terms of economic engagement between India and Japan in their over 7 decades of engagement?
Without doubt, I think they have a very strong and complementary economic relationship with them. And their trade currently stands around $20 billion, but it can go enormously long. But much more has been happening in terms of Japan's ODA, which is Official Development Assistance. We remember Suzuki being the first one to create revolution in Indian automobiles about 25 years ago by launching a joint venture, Maruti car manufacturing. Since then, we have seen Yamaha, Toyota, Sony, Honda, all manufacturing in India now increasingly. So fundamentally, technology and economic partnership tie them together. And that is what saw, for example, in 2022, Prime Minister of Japan promising 5 trillion yen of investments in next 5 years. And last year, the two sides also signed an MOU for joint development and production of semiconductor, which is the most exciting technology and currency of power. So two also want to work together in sort of semiconductor sector. So a whole lot of complementarities even in economic relationship, especially in terms of investments of Japan in India, ODA of Japan in India, and of course India's very attractive and reliable market for investments by Japan, and Make in India really invites Japanese to invest technology and provide finance for FDI here. And that is where, again, I think the foreign minister in Tokyo did underline the fact that, India can be a very attractive destination for investments because of political stability, because of the whole demographic dividend that we have. And he underlined that Japan perhaps today have to look at India in a very different fashion than relying on legacies, which makes sometimes Japan also, in that sense, hedge against Chinese, sort of anxieties in Japan and India coming closer. And of course, look at this whole new India and particularly underlined the need for expanding defense cooperation, where Japanese have often been seen sometimes reluctant to pass on advanced technologies to India, even when India is now a quad partner with Japan and Australia and United States together. So I think the new assertive India is opening a new chapter with Japan and building partnership in whole new sectors, including defense cooperation.
Professor Singh, in fact, there have been common concerns between India and Japan about what is happening in East China Sea, South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, and Indo-Pacific, basically China's military muscle flexing, and that is a matter of concern for almost all the democratic forces in the world. But particularly Japan and India, both the countries have huge stakes in South China Sea, in Taiwan Strait, and Indo-Pacific. So do you see wider scope of expansion of cooperation, particularly in the defense domain between India and Japan, to address common concerns of China's bullying, particularly in East China Sea, South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, and Indo-Pacific?
Manas, among various sectors in defense cooperation, I think you did underline maritime security cooperation is a very central element and an expanding element of their defense cooperation, whether it is at the larger Indo-Pacific vision level or it is issue of Taiwan Straits, or more recently as two foreign ministers perhaps had discussions on what is happening in Red Sea, for example, where we have even seen casualties now, how these attacks have disrupted the whole commerce in that region. So how can these two countries begin to work together? And that is where India has serious concerns about Japan. For example, India for a decade now has been negotiating for 12 amphibious search and rescue planes to be brought from Japan, and that has been somehow been staying in kind of a deep freezer, and things have not happened. Similarly, India has been wanting Japan to share lithium-ion battery-based submarine technologies or unicorn antennas that make bring stealth to our warships. So I think that the maritime security again involves cooperation, not just in having military or naval exercises, which again 2007 is the time when India and Japan had started naval exercises called Malabar exercises, because just a year before, in 2006, during Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's visit to Tokyo, they had signed India-Japan Strategic and Global Partnership. So maritime cooperation has been there, sometimes lukewarm, but of course now an expanding area. But even within that, technology transfer is something that India is asserting is the need of the hour. And I assume that some kind of new understandings will be evolved in coming times to strengthen that area of technology transfers to build that maritime security cooperation in sometimes volatile waters in which these two countries are located.
Professor Singh, you have been tracking External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar's ongoing visit to Tokyo very closely. Can we expect some kind of new initiatives by India and Japan during our External Affairs Minister's ongoing visit to Tokyo?
I think some initiative that, shall we say, already took place is that for the first time we had sort of Raisina Dialogue Roundtable from Tokyo. Raisina, as you remember, dialogue happens in New Delhi every year, and it was to coincide with that. So that was a kind of a new chapter in how Raisina dialogue is organized, in which the Minister of External Affairs of India has a major partnership, and Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar has been sort of seriously involved in how Raisina dialogue is conducted. So that could be seen as a kind of new initiative. But I think more important is to understand the kind of new assertive tone of India's foreign policy and the new changing India, where, in that Raisina dialogue itself, Foreign Minister underlined how India is moving at a very different pace of whether it is infrastructure building or it is human development indices and so on, and kind of nudged Japan to move out of or shed the past legacies of looking at India as a sort of developing country. India is a very rapidly transforming country. And I think that kind of presentation of India as a sort of far more credible and important partner for a country like Japan is something that might see some kind of sharing of new vision on both sides. And I think that would be more important rather than, nitty-gritties in terms of brass tacks. The larger vision is transforming. And I assume some of the outcomes of that will be seen in coming times.
As you mentioned, the Raisina dialogue where External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar spoke. In the dialogue, actually, Mr. Jaishankar described Japan as India's national partner. So his comments that Japan is India's natural partner and the world is headed towards re-globalization, and both India and Japan can play a very, very significant role as natural partners. So how do you see Mr. S. Jaishankar's observation that India and Japan are natural partners in the context of the geopolitical turmoil that we are witnessing and to deal with various challenges that the world is facing today?
I think, Manas, this is very interesting because a long time back, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee had redefined relations with the United States by naming it natural allies. We noticed that Dr. Jaishankar also described now India and Japan as natural allies. And I think that has a reflection on the larger vision as to where India and Japan stand together in determining the larger global agenda. And he did underline that India is today shaping international agenda. And, whether it is at the level of pan-Asian initiatives in terms of redefining Asian multilateralism, or it is the larger global scale visions in terms of making, let's say, United Nations, which he called the only universal agency that we have as of now, far more representative of contemporary realities. And you remember the G4, in which India and Japan were two partners, were four countries that were, making an effort to seek reformation of United Nations Security Council. So India and Japan, in that sense, when two foreign ministers meet, they discuss, of course, bilateral issues, regional issues, and also global issues. And when they see each other as natural allies, they should see building of larger convergences and consensus on how to address some of the challenges which are in their bilateral relations, but more so also in terms of their responsibilities at ensuring regional peace and prosperity, whether it is, Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific and India's Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which sort of merges together in building far more transparent and collaborative connectivity between these two nations. So convergence of views in terms of regional level, and then of course also at the global level in terms of how United Nations should become far more representative of our contemporary reality, are multiple layers and layers of different levels of convergences that underline when we describe that India sees Japan as a natural ally. And I think that underlines the increasing inordinate historic and global responsibilities that two nations see for themselves, for which, of course, the bilateral bonhomie and then partnerships are really critical.
Professor Singh, there have been significant expansion of cooperation in the framework of Quad, and India, the United States, Japan, and Australia are members of Quad. That we all know. Do you think the energy of Quad will further charge up India and Japan ties and encourage both the countries to work towards ensuring an ASEAN kind of a diversity that we always talk about?
For a long time, ASEAN had remained at what we called driving seat of Indian or Asian multilateralism. And it is from late 1990s that when ASEAN became really much closer to China, because of, you remember, East Asian financial crisis where Chinese came and helped ASEAN countries, that some of the major powers like United States thought that perhaps ASEAN is now going to become much more softer on inordinately rising power and influence of China that needed to be restrained and brought into, sort of code of conduct defined by global norms and institutions. That is where this whole thought of the Quad sort of germinates. First in 2007, and you would remember in 2007 August, Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, had made a very famous speech in India's parliament called Confluence of Two Oceans, which is where the whole idea of Indo-Pacific starts emerging. And that is where I think the two countries begin to think of how to build that kind of cooperation for themselves, and which has seen them now coming together in Quadrilateral Security Framework, or Quad as we call it.
Professor Singh, thank you so very much for a detailed perspective about India-Japan strategic cooperation as well as increasing cooperation between the two countries in various other domains. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Manash.
You were listening to a discussion on significance of India-Japan strategic partnership addressing global challenges and stability. The participants were Professor Swaran Singh, strategic analyst, and Manash Pratim Bhuiyan, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 928-909-4044.